everybody. Welcome to Unlimited Commander. I'm Adam, and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host, Matt. Matt, how's it going?
It's going good. This week has been a very weird week for me. I've been dealing with a individual who has very, very strong opinions about things that do not matter, and they are insistent on pushing them forward. But it made me think of something, so I'll explain the situation, then you can tell me what you're thinking. So in this particular case, we're in a voice chat with like 13 people, like quite a few people around our age and younger. So 20s, late 20s to late 30s ish. And this person with their strong opinions mentioned that they thought that Avatar The Last Airbender wasn't very good. And
well, they're already wrong, but carry on.
Yeah, we were curious if they meant like the movie or if they meant the series in general. They said that not only did they prefer Korra, which is fine, having a preference for one thing or another is fine, but that he thought that Avatar was actively bad and then continued on his train of why it was bad. And I can't even begin to get into all of the just terrible logic things and all of these other things. It's clear that they watched maybe the first half of the first season.
Okay.
So like they have very little context to the show as a whole, which tends to be this person's MO.
All right.
But it made me think about something, and it's just two things here. Is one, how much of a property do you have to experience in order for you to have a full take on it? And two, if your take diametrically opposes popular opinion, by how much does it have to differ before you're like, no one needs to hear my argument? Like, no one is going to listen to me no matter what I say on this, and I should let it go.
Well, the first one that you asked was how much of a thing do you need to take in? I don't think there's like an actual number, but I'm going to say at least the majority. Like, there's a couple things that like it's common for people to say that, for example, Star Trek Deep Space Nine suffers the first couple seasons, but then the remainder of the series, because I think it was 6 seasons or something like that, all told, it really came into its own and then excelled to be one of the better series. Like, I know there was so many, but like DS9 is regarded as one of the best series because it was not an exploration series. It was like a political commentary series. And it really took off after you got through the first couple seasons where they didn't really know that's what they wanted out of it. They were, they were trying to be exploratory, but being in one spot, and they realized that's not going to work. So they shifted gears and started talking about how like the geopolitical climate was being affected by like the presence of the Starfleet, and that became interesting. So you don't know that if you don't get through at least the first couple seasons and start into the third season. So you can't have a full take on DS9 if you're like, I watched the first season, it sucked, so the whole show sucked. Like, incorrect. I would say like a majority of that needs to be taken in before you. It's like saying like, I don't like Marvel movies. I watched Iron Man 1 and 2 and the first Thor.
Right. I agree with that. Like, my stipulation with that kind of thing is that if you feel like something isn't for you, you are free to cut out as early as you want. And like, I don't mean that in any way that's like it's like if you watched one episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, you watched the first one, and for some reason that was going to be your defining moment of the series, and you're just like, I wasn't engaged, I didn't get into it, like I don't want to watch it. Cool, that's fine. I think from then on, though, any other opinion you have on Avatar: The Last Airbender should be zero opinion.
Well, like,
because
yeah, you're right. Like, once you got to a point where you couldn't engage with it, then you're not engaging. You can say, this wasn't for me. I know I have
Mhm.
no opinion beyond it because I could not engage with it. Like, this sounds like this individual is trying to like be partake in the fandom without having a proper fandom's opinion.
Yes, and this happens with multiple fandoms, and it's wild to me. It's wild to me. What about the second part of the question? What do you think about that? Like, at what point is your opinion on something controversial enough? And maybe, like, in my head, this person knows that they're wrong.
I don't think that this situation actually can answer that question. It sounds
Mm-hmm.
like this individual, like from the way you've described, is consistently not fully partaking in something, formulating a contrary opinion on it, and then claiming
Mm-hmm.
it to be true. You're not going to you it sounds more like you're just never going to agree with this individual, or this individual just wishes to be contrary. It's
Mm-hmm.
like an opinion based on like a full understanding of something and then still being contrary
Mm-hmm.
can't necessarily be wrong, right? Like, it's an opinion. It's like a preference thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, a preference of like it wasn't for me, it didn't grab me. If you watched an
Yeah.
entire series of, I don't know, pick current important
Mm-hmm.
anime and or science fiction show, some nerdy
Mm-hmm.
thing, right? And you watch it start to finish, and then you still have the opinion that it sucks, I can't disagree with
Mm-hmm.
you. It sucked for you.
Right.
Good. Good. Now
Right.
you know that it sucked for
Yeah.
you. It didn't suck for me,
Yeah.
and it didn't suck for the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
But there's
For the other 13, 14 people in the voice chat.
sure, right? Like, if it wasn't for
who
you,
are
but like,
wildly upset.
but you watched 5 episodes of a 3 or 4 season. I think it was 3 because it was like one season for each of the other tribes, like the water tribe,
Mm-hmm.
etc. Right? So like, there was this water, then it was
Mm-hmm.
the earth, and the fire. So it was 3 seasons
Yeah.
of the show, which I really enjoyed. And I think that they're also incorrect. But like, they watched like half of the first season where they're introducing characters. Like, you don't get to see like
Mm-hmm.
Zuko's redemption arc.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Massive.
haven't gotten into any character growth by episode 10 or whatever of season 1.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
You don't see Sokka's heartbreak, right? Like, there's just so many things that happen in this show that this individual just never saw, that are what people came to love about the show, was the actual depth of these characters despite being actual children. You know what I mean? And like, on this like world changing, like world crossing endeavor, very Pokemon-esque. So
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like this opinion is even fully formed. So you can't compare it and say, well, like, you know what, your opinion is contrary to everyone else's, you must be incorrect. It doesn't matter if that's your opinion, that's your opinion. It sounds like it's just not fully formed, and this person never fully forms an opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's mostly right. And I had a moment with it later in the week because someone turned me on. Did you know that Fall Out Boy has made a new version of We Didn't Start the Fire?
Mm-hmm.
I listened to it this past week. I went ahead and listened to it, and I made a gut reaction, and then I decided to listen to it a couple more times just to get a feel of what's going on. I might actually end up just making a video breaking down the original We Didn't Start the Fire to help people understand my opinion on this. But the short version is, it is probably the best remake of that song that I've heard, and I still don't like it.
Yeah, it sounds like you have more in-depth feelings, but like, I mean, maybe you would have chosen different historical events or something like that, because I mean, it's just it's not a very well written. It never has been. It's never been like a really good song. It's just that like it rhymes. It's got a good beat to it, and it talked about like at the time current or recent events. And then this Fall Out Boy version has done one where it's a similar thing. They didn't change much of the song, from my understanding. It's just different historic events. So maybe you don't like those historic events. Like, how can you disagree with the content of the song when all it is stating things that occur?
Stating things, right. So everyone, make sure to tune into my channel eventually for the 10-minute breakdown of We Didn't Start the Fire and why this is a thing, because it's at least going to be historically interesting.
I know somebody whose history teacher, that was their curriculum, actually. They took that song, and all they did was they taught a lesson every day
for modern American history or modern global politics or whatever.
Mount. So,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. So Speaking of like modern opinions on things,
Yes.
what have we got lined up today? I stole the segue back.
You got it. Well, so we were ditching around Twitter the other day, like we do, and our good friend Light
Like they
made
do.
a comment, like they do. A problem that we face here in our community in Magic, and basically what they said was, uh, you are missing out on a bunch of good cards in every set because sets new cards come out so frequently and we're getting an influx of new cards all the time that it's not that anybody cheated, it's not that you got blindsided by a card because it's a sleeper hit, it's because of the mass number of cards that there are. And we were wondering how many sleeper hits actually are there amongst all these cards, and we found some in one set, and we're probably going to do this again later. But what we decided to do was take the set in particular that Light had mentioned, which was Streets of New Capenna Commander, and we found some cards that do not show up on EDH Direct lists very often. They're very low on the count. They're things that people are probably not looking at very often, and we want to share them with you and tell you why you should consider these kind of things for your commander deck. We might talk a little bit about Cube, but mostly we're going to stick to commander, I think, today,
Yeah, probably.
and just kind of get an idea of what kind of cards are you missing in the threshold of everything when you're only looking at the top 10 things from commander that you should buy.
Like,
right?
And even then, and you're right, and that we Light had mentioned only Streets of New Capenna Commander, and that I think inspired us to stick to something like that. Like, I don't want to get into the set proper. And there's the one reason why I think that sticks out the most is standard sets see arena, and so we get to see a lot of the cards that go through standard sets pretty regularly. They hit arena, we talk about them a lot. They do go on to like get commander reviews and stuff like that, and a lot of the commander shows will go through a deck entirely. But what we wanted to do was say, like, Light's point was, you don't know this card exists, and it's not your fault. Yeah. And we want to remind you of some of these cards. So we went through the commander decks, the commander product specifically. And we just went through and we said, okay, what are some sweet cards that we think you should be playing, or at least be reminded of, because they were neat. Because they're not on the top of anybody's list. I'm just going to kick this off. The first one that I think that we found that really talked about how you can have a neat effect and do cool stuff. And also, I'd like to point out that almost everything on the list that we chose is going to be hella budget.
Very inexpensive to pick up if you can find copies.
The finding copies seems to be the thing. I've actually tried to find everything on our list for myself to purchase, because most of these are like, even I forgot. Like, we looked through this list and we're like, holy crap, I forgot about this card. So like the one that I forgot about was Turf War. Turf War, 4 and a red for an enchantment, says when it enters the battlefield, for each player, put a contested counter on target land that player controls. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, if that player controls one or more lands with contested counters on them, that creature's controller gains control and untaps it. This card I love. I'm going to tell you what I want it for and where I'm going to put it, because I'm going to put it somewhere. This is, let me see if I can find, there's a particular land that I actively play in my Zedru deck, which is all about like swapping control around. Contested Warzone came out in Mirrodin Besieged, and it says whenever a creature deals combat damage to you, that creature's controller gains control of Contested Warzone, and then it just taps to add a colorless mana. It's very flavorful in that deck, and this just means that I can now make everybody have a Contested Warzone. That's super funny. And then you start watching people chase it around. Another card that this looks like that I think people do know about to a certain extent is the Coveted Jewel. Right? The 6 mana rock that like everybody likes chasing around the table because it does gives like,
it gets you mana and draws you cards.
Yeah. People love this stuff. So
hmm I think it's very good, and I really actually love turf war because we always talk about like Monarch and getting Monarch into things and how it aids in making combat happen, right? Well, if you are down a couple of lands and you need to make sure that you can do stuff, you will start attacking and doing things in an effort to keep your land balance going in your way. In the same respect with this card, your opponents will attack you to try to take resources from you so that you are no longer getting that extra favor, which means it's a mini monarch in style and flavor to what you're already going to be doing. So you could throw this into a deck with red in it that just wants your opponents to have to swing. You could throw it into Karazakar.
Oh, the goading ones, yeah.
The goading tyrant, you know?
Any of those,
just to,
yeah, the eye tyrant guy, or
yeah, the eye tyrant, yeah. Yeah, Zancha is another like attacky matters Rakdos commander.
Or just generally a red deck. Like, I mean, you throw this out and it starts having all your opponents look at each other instead of you. So, like, anything you can do to start taking the heat off yourself, give yourself a little bit of breathing room. And then the best part is that those contested counters, they stay on the land, but if somebody blows up this enchantment, like say you have somebody, like you attack a bunch of your opponents, steal each of their lands, and then you blow up your own enchantment, and then they don't get to get them back because it's the enchantment that does the effect of swapping control.
Absolutely. And especially in red-white decks, like I think Boros really benefits from this because you can get in some sneaky attacks, get some of these lands over to your side, and then blow up your own enchantment because you're in white, and so you have the ability to blow up enchantments, and just have ramped at the expense of your opponents, which is in a Boros deck is super helpful. You know, just having a couple extra generic mana that you can pay for things, or hopefully some red and white mana,
right?
So that you can do stuff.
And like, it's not just if you do it in a Boros deck where like it actually cares about that effect more, like specifically the ramp aspect, it's a double edged because not only are you up a land, but they are down one. So it's actually a 2 mana swing for each one.
Absolutely.
But mostly I'm just in it for the shenanigans.
Yep. And at the low price of 15 cents, I feel like it's worth a shot. If you can get a hold of one, give it a go.
Yeah.
Let's see, what's our next card? Aven Courier is a 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/1 flying bird advisor. When Aven Courier attacks, choose a counter on a permanent you control. Put a counter of that kind on target permanent you control if it doesn't have a counter of that kind on it. Okay, this one is a little more tricky, right? It's not quite as damning as some of the other things that we might talk about later. But this card works excellently inside of the Thrumming Bird counters matters type thing. It is definitely, without doubt, a card that fits into the Spara group, whatever the lawyers, the brokers, that's what they're called. The brokers deck, which wants you to have a whole bunch of different counters and do a bunch of different things with it. But even if you can't, using Aven Courier to attack and Thrumming Bird to attack, you get to put a +1 counter on something that doesn't have one already, and then if Thrumming Bird gets in, you get to proliferate. Like, these things stack up really, really well, and if you're using multiple counters, it works even better. What I love about it is that's an attack trigger, so it's going to happen before damage, before effects, so you can move a shield counter, and then you are protecting a creature that needed a shield counter. Or you can move an indestructible counter or a menace counter if you're into that stuff, and get yourself a little bit of extra evasion and protection for what you're doing.
I like it because it doesn't. It's like a multiplier, not a real like big multiplier, but a multiplier of these things. Because you take, say you have something with even we'll just say +1/+1 because it's easy. So you have one, you have two creatures, this thing, and one with a +1/+1 counter on it. You swing with this thing, and don't even have to swing with the other thing. It looks around and says, "What kind of counters are out here?" And that says, "Oh, that's got a +1. I'm going to also put a +1." It doesn't move them; it multiplies them. So
exactly,
I really like, and like shield counters, it's good for that, sure. But like I think just any sort of like +1/+1, not so much the keyword counters, unless you have something that has a lot and then like one other thing doesn't have them or something.
I think the place where this sees a lot more play is in the Bant versions of +1/+1s or Simic +1/+1s, because again, these counters will also get multiplied by hardened scales, by doubling season, by Vorn collects, what other little things you're using to get yourself more counters. This will add 2 counters instead of 1 when those kind of things happen, and that's just good value.
Yeah.
It's good value.
Yeah, I think I put one on in my cart right now because I think I'm going to try it out in my Atraxa. Atraxa +1/+1s is going to really enjoy this.
100%, and it is from the broker deck, and I actually used the broker deck in a No Lands band a while ago where I was using the main deck, Pierre the Polarizer or whatever, and we were getting shield counters and Avon Courier adding a shield counter or something, and then I proliferate the whole board, and then like by the end of that game I had like 6 or 7 creatures with 12 shield counters on. They were basically indestructible.
Yeah.
They were functionally indestructible. And so like you can really get some crazy shenanigans going with this if you're willing to put in the legwork.
Yeah, and like also like if you're playing in any of those ones that are like the Sultai ones that are most like the grave. No, what was it? Nah, that was Abzan. Don't worry about that one. I was thinking about that one that cares about like what goes into your graveyard. But like, that's still going to end up being something you might play in like Atraxa because it's this and then Abzan. But anyway, I digress. But solid choice. 25 cents? 11 cents if you go like super duper cheap.
11 cents if you go looking for it, which 11 is pretty cheap. That's a pretty cheap card.
I think that when I look at these, I'm going to choose. So like when we're looking at this, the full art or the extended border ones or extended art ones, those were the ones that were in like collector boosters and set boosters. So you wouldn't have like the regular border one was in the commander deck, but it would have been harder to find that because somebody would have had to have like gotten the deck and then just sold everything but the one card or something like that they wanted. Whereas like stores would have opened collector and set boosters to populate. So I would say that the 25 cent one is the one you're probably going to track. So that's, I think, the pricing that I'm going to go with. Yeah. And you did that with the last one already. So we're going to give you those prices. So a quarter, pretty sure that a quarter is worth spending to try this out. Oh, also I preface like we're giving you budget options, but also proxy. I don't care.
Yeah.
Say that every episode.
Especially with these cards that may be harder to get a hold of now just because they were only in a commander product and now no longer exist.
Yeah, I've been struggling to find some of these in like my LGS and even like one of the national, because I'm in Canada, of course, so we don't have I don't have really good access to like Card Kingdom and TCG Player. Like they exist. I can order from them. I've done so before. But then I end up dealing with like border crossings and exchange rates and stuff like that. So just to like make things easier, I like to stick to some Canadian ones. And it has been a struggle to track some of these down. So like
I will say 50 cents on Card Kingdom, at least 8 available as of recording.
Yeah, so there you go.
So like you can get there.
Dig them out, give it a try. You know what else you should try? You should try Dogged Detective. This one I have had actual experience with. There's a couple on these that I threw on the list because I've actually played with them, and it turns out that they're like real good. And I want to share these, but most people, because I didn't know this one existed until I drafted it out of Light's Cube, actually. Dogged Detective is 1 and a black for a 2/1 human rogue, and when it enters the battlefield, surveil 2, and when an opponent draws their second card each turn, you may return Dogged Detective from your graveyard to your hand. I will tell you that thing hit my hand every single turn.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have like.
Turns out people.
Yeah.
Turns out people love drawing cards in Commander. Did you know
I
that?
personally was very aware. Yeah. As one of the people who loves drawing like 30 cards like a game, maybe more if I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I was very aware. But like also like it just plays in like you don't if you play it for two for 2/1 that surveils 2, which surveilling 2 is a really nice number.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of decks that really care about plopping stuff into the graveyard. This one's in my shopping cart right now because I want to try it out in a couple places like Nethroi.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this would do really good in Nethroi, or something that discards maybe a little more. I've got some stuff that really likes discarding stuff that like will let you get this back because this kind of has that like Squee-esque effect.
Mm-hmm.
Where like you discard Squee and then at the beginning of your upkeep you can put Squee from your graveyard into your hand.
It's a great discard decision. It's a great sacrifice decision.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a solid 2/1 for 2, like a solid piker. And then on top of all that other stuff, you get to surveil 2, which surveilling in a black deck better than scrying.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just gonna enjoy yourself. It's just gonna be a good time.
Yeah, man.
So
solid choice. I not like I said, I had this even in a cube in a more controlled setting, and I still managed to have this in my hand every turn.
Yep.
Play it out, sack it to something, or discard it to something, and every time I started my turn, it was in my hand. It was beautiful. Yep. This is a great card, and it's also a great card for 83 cents.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 50 cents on Card Kingdom, just in case people want to know. It's actually available 50 cents.
Yeah, it's true. I'm looking just at Scryfall right now, and Scryfall I think pulls from TCG Player.
Yeah, they usually pull from TCG. But just like as a note out there, I just want people to know, it's like I know a lot of people are worried about like the availability of these kind of things because of the things. It's like so far we haven't said one that I haven't found on Card Kingdom so far. Yeah. So if worst case scenario you got to go to Card Kingdom, I would just still say proxy if you can proxy. Until Card Kingdom is sponsoring this show, I will advocate for proxying over.
Hilariously, there are shows that Card Kingdom sponsors that still say proxy.
That still say proxy, right? Like because Card Kingdom knows.
Spend your money how you're going to spend your money, right? Like they don't need my money if like they're getting so many people's money. Exactly. They get the majority of the money, and that's all they really care about. I mean, either way. We keep delving into this. Proxy if you want, buy them if you want, do what you want, play the game, play with us. Anyway.
But Dogger Detective.
Solid magic card. Thank you to Light for showing me this one specifically. And one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure it got on this list. It almost didn't get on this list, actually. I forgot to write it down, even though we talked about it. So
yeah, it's so good. This one is one that I wanted on the list. I'm actually going to skip through our list a little bit because I'm an adult and I can do what I want. Into Deep. Okay. Into Deep is a enchantment. It costs double blue for an enchantment with split second. It has enchant creature, planeswalker, or clue. Why would you have clue? Stay and pay attention. Enchanted permanent is a colorless clue artifact with 2 sacrifices artifact, draw a card, and loses all other abilities. So it is no longer a creature or planeswalker. So just for rules' sake there, the reason why it says it can enchant to a clue is so that it doesn't immediately fall off. This is like a bunch of those cards that you see in other sets, like Ichthyomorphous that turns things into a 0/1 fish with no abilities. There's one in Theros that turns things into a planeswalk, or turns a planeswalker into an enchantment or something like that.
I don't know.
There's
the most common one that we know of that we see quite a bit of, especially in Commander, is Imprisoned in the Moon. Imprisoned in the Moon being 2 and a blue for an enchantment aura. It says enchant creature, land, or planeswalker. Enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tap, add a colorless to your mana pool, and loses all other types and abilities. This is just another one of those things. Like, I can't remember the treasure one you had said, but like, here's like a very. I said the analog. Here it is. There's another one that's just like it. This is just another version of that.
Yep.
If you're playing any sort of like the Bant Enchantress is, I think, where this like really sings.
Mm-hmm. With the exception that this has split second.
Yeah, it's super dope.
So the important thing about split second is that split second makes this card the last thing on the stack. So you can't add anything else to the stack, cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities over this card. So this card can't be countered. It can't be destroyed on the stack. It can't be, you can't manipulate it. It's going to hit the board. It's got to happen. And with that in play, I love turning my opponent's best stuff into things that they don't want them to be. And this is probably one of my favorite, like, undersung of this set, just because it's like, okay. So the thing that I mentioned was, you put this on somebody's commander. Yes, obviously they're going to pay 2 and sack it to draw a card. But that means that they had to pay 4 extra mana for their commander off of this grouping because they had to sack it first to get rid of it, and then had to pay an extra 2 because of commander tax in order to do whatever. So you're creating a lot of situations where you can get rid of your opponent's major threats, just to turn them into clues. Make them
Yeah, like
make them work for it.
It's very blue, right? Like that's the thing with like, and there's white effects like this too, but not like the blue ones seem to be the ones that do this, where they turn them into another type of permanent, the polymorph effect, because it's very much a like that's a later problem kind of thing. It doesn't get rid of the permanent; it's just like a down the line thing. Green also has some, but I think green has stepped away from it a bit. The last one I think we saw was Kenrith's transformation.
Yeah.
But like that way was a green thing for a long time with Lignify. But white is really good at this with stuff like Darksteel Mutation as well.
Yeah,
keeps him.
I think that it's such a cool little setup because it creates these gameplay options where it's like, I don't have to put up with you just recasting this creature or putting it back in your graveyard and recurring it or whatever, putting it back in your deck and recasting it. I'm making you make a choice to activate this yourself. Otherwise, it's just a dud on the board doing nothing. And I love that. I love that, especially when it's a non-creature like this, where it turns it into an artifact or an enchantment or something. Love it. Play it. Use it. It's great.
Yeah, and I like it's a funnier and more exciting thing than just like Boomerang, because that's basically what it says, right? Like, Boomerang. Is that even the right one I'm thinking of? Target permanent. Yes. So like Boomerang, return target permanent to its owner's hand for 2 blue mana. Basically the same concept, but it's funnier. Also, in too deep and turning it into a clue is very. I love the flavor in Capenna is a whole other episode, but like
the flavor of that card though, where it's just like, oh, a person becomes a piece of a crime scene.
Yeah, the chalk outline, right? Also,
chalk outline is so good.
If you look back at all of the old split second cards, I may find one and put it on the screen for those watching on YouTube, but they all had this like split in the art to show the like Corrosion Grip is one that's very well known, where it was like a sword and then it was vines or whatever have you. That might be the one I pick and choose because it's the one I remembered.
Yeah.
But like if you look at In Too Deep, it's got that line of like magic lightning going across and it's like turning them into the chalk line. I think that's very cool.
Very cool. Super cool. Love it.
That person that was In Too Deep might have had better success and not been part of the crime scene if they had just given into the protection racket.
Oh, yeah.
Protection racket.
That leads us very cleanly into protection
racket. Puns and segues. You heard it here first. Protection racket. 2 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, repeat the following process for each opponent in turn order. Reveal the top card of your library. That player may pay life equal to that card's mana value. If they do, exile that card. Otherwise, put it into your hand. Very flavorful as well, I must say. I have this in a deck because it came in a precon that I had picked up, and I was like, I think this is probably good. And then I put it in that deck, and then this card did like 50 points of life to my opponents in one game. Not all to one person, of course, but spread out over the course of many turns because it was never quite enough for any of my opponents to want to deal with it, but it was definitely enough to like cause an impact. And of course, I had a bunch of like heavy hitters. I domed one person for probably like 30 life overall because I got them with 4 like 7 drops. Right, like it's because I was playing like it was a black deck, so it had like Sheoldred Whispering one and a couple of other nice big things that they didn't want me to have in my hand. And hilarious,
Burning Rune Scarred Demon or whatever.
yeah, right. So then they ended up watching like they just, oh, you can't have that, it's getting exiled. And in classic black deck fashion, I was like, hell yeah, let's go. That's exiled, that's gone. I don't care. Power at any cost, right? And then in the off chance that they were like, no, I think you can keep that one because I don't want to take 8 or whatever it is. Then you got to draw a card. It's like Bob, but for your opponents. And I think I like. Oh, sorry, Bob being like, what is the actual name for Bob?
I had it a minute ago because I was going to say it too. God, everybody knows Bob. It's a Dark Confidant.
Dark Confidant, right? So like a Dark Confidant says at the beginning of your upkeep, you reveal the top card of your library, you pay life equal to its mana value, and then you put it into its hand. Your hand. Sorry, yeah. And so this is like that, but for everyone else, only if they pay the life, you don't put it in your hand, and it's super funny. And like it's a 3 mana enchantment. You just put it out nice and early if you can. It stays there. If this thing does. Let's say I'm just going to put this into terms. On one turn, if it does 9 damage in one turn, say you get 3 costs in one turn, or on average, and you dome each opponent, that's 3 lightning bolts for 3 mana, and then everything else is gravy. Maybe you drew a card, maybe you just kept doming them, and nobody. I found it hilarious that it just never was a thing anyone was worried about. I eventually got taken out of that game because like. They couldn't deal with this, but like for $2.50, it did a lot of work in a game of Magic: The Gathering.
Yeah, this is the kind of card that I see people rediscovering in like a year or two, and then it's in like every Edict deck because because every Edict deck is very mana intensive. They really have to have like really good value cards, and you're doing what you want to do to your opponent anyway. If they're like, no, you can't have Grave Pact, and it's like, cool, take 4 damage. You're 4 life closer to being finished off by everything else that's going on. So it's just going to be one of those cards that I cannot imagine it staying at the price it is right now. Card Kingdom has $1.80.
Yeah.
$2.99 for the foil.
Like scoop this now or proxy it again. I do not care. But just like give this a go. This one I will say like I found this one not so much like on my own sort of. Heard the name before, didn't really stick until I pulled it out of that precon, and then I put it in a deck, and it just like it did work. So give that one a go.
Absolutely.
What do you got next?
Next up, I think we've got 2 green cards on this list, and I think I want to particularly talk about the one that I wanted to add more so than anything, which is Vivian Stampede. So Vivian Stampede is 4 and double green for a sorcery. Each creature you control gains vigilance, trample, and melee until end of turn. Just for those people out there, melee is the creature gets +1/+1 for each opponent that's being attacked each player that's being attacked in that moment. So if you're attacking all 3 players, you'll give all your creatures +3/+3 because they'll all have melee. And then it says, at the beginning of your next main phase this turn, draw a card for each player who is dealt combat damage this turn. So you're probably going to draw 3 cards as well when you're doing
like that. Perfect scenario, right?
Yeah. Perfect scenario. You're going to get vigilance, trample, +3/+3 across the board, and you're going to get to draw 3 cards.
Cool.
Like most likely.
Yeah.
I love this card. This card to me is better than a lot of the overrun effects, and it has not gotten a lot of love, and we figured that it probably hasn't gotten that love because it was in this set and it was a part of the Commander precons. I play very few sorcery speed finishers in those kind of decks. I usually tend to run Hoof or and raise Forerunners. Those are things that you need. And then Overwhelming Stampede is so good that it's kind of hard to justify not running Overwhelming Stampede. If even if you aren't running Hoof and raise, you might still run Overwhelming Stampede.
Yeah, it depends.
That being said, Vivian Stampede here is the next best one in my mind. It is right there on that corner. And when you are building a green deck that needs finishers, you can't really go wrong with one that leaves you untapped so that you can block if it doesn't work out. If for some reason someone stops you, getting vigilance, pretty big deal. Getting +3/+3, also very decent. Obviously getting trample. And then getting to draw cards again. If you make it through that finisher turn and you didn't finish, 3 cards will help.
Mm-hmm.
And at the low price of 49 cents on Card Kingdom,
yeah,
it's
24 on TCG, like 70 or Canadian cents for the extended art one. Like, and it's not. And I think we did agree with this, and I'm going to just like reiterate. It's because there's only so many slots in any given commander deck that you can dedicate to certain effects. We've talked about this when we were doing the Shaku's series, and I've like very cleanly outlined where like all of my stuff went, and when I look at like enders or finishers or whatever you want to call them, whatever works for you, you know, in your head, you only have so many slots, right? You got to get your meat and potatoes. This is like the dessert, and it's fine if you want to have your dessert, but you only have so much room for your dessert because it's not super healthy for you to have too much. Like I tend to run personally somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4, depending on what the deck itself is doing. And there's just so many cards already out there that do this thing. Now, I'm not saying that like, and the big thing, like you said, was it was only available in a pre-con, so it's very hard to get your hands on, to the exception of, again, collector boosters, set boosters. They might have opened this up, but like, still not super easy to get your hands on. And why would you go buy, even at 25 cents, like, it's a finisher. Some of them are better than others, sure. Nobody's arguing that Hoof is amazing. Overwhelming Stampede is just, well, not always, but like usually strictly better than Overrun. Like, there's this stuff. And the other ones that we keep forgetting, like Old Kamal Fist of Croja, which has Overrun repeatable written right on him. Right? Like, it's just pay 5 and pay the same, pay the Overrun mana, and your team gets overrun, and then you can do it again and again and again and again. Like, there's just so many things out there that do this thing. And I'm not saying that any are better or worse than the others. It doesn't really matter. You're going to just put at some of them. Triumph for the Hordes is one you didn't even mention. Yeah. Right.
No, I don't mention Triumph because I find Triumph to be a different card because of the infect.
I don't.
But like it.
This is where we disagree, right? Like, the infect doesn't matter in my mind because like I give trample to a bunch of bodies and then I get in. The fact that they have infect just means maybe I get to do it with one less creature or something like that. But like, this is like saying Tainted Strike isn't, just like a combo kill either. But that's a different topic. Anyway, just in general, like, there's just so many effects to this that do this that, like, why would I go and search for a hard to find card?
Exactly.
To put into my deck in a slot that's already full of something that does essentially the thing.
Yep. But that being said, if you are in a jam, you can't spend $3 on Overwhelming Stampede. 50 cents is a viable solution for you, and you got it, or you got access to Card Kingdom.
$20
or whatever
for a freaking Triumph of the Hordes.
$20 for Triumph of the Horde. $50 or whatever for Hoof.
Don't do it.
Right? Yeah. You can easily play Vivian Stampede in its place if you're the kind of person who doesn't like proxies, and you save yourself literally 100 times what the card is worth.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Absolutely.
Sounds fair to me.
Do the thing, right? Like, and again, like, that's the only thing I think is why it was so underplayed. You're right; it's a solid Magic card, but it's not out there. So, any other honorable mentions? We actually just generally agreed these were awesome. I'm going to talk about Audacious Swap because I think that it's just like slept on in the sense that, like,
go for it.
I don't think it's necessarily the best card in the set, but I think that it's a neat thing that people just don't know it exists. So Audacious
Right.
Swap is 3 and a red for an instant with Casualty 2, which means as you cast this, you may sacrifice a creature with power 2 or greater, and if you do, you may copy this spell. And then it says the owner of target non-enchantment permanent, which is a hilarious stipulation, by the way. Never see that on any other card. The owner of target non-enchantment permanent shuffles it into their library, then exiles the top card of their library. If it is a land card, they put it on the battlefield. Otherwise, they may cast it without paying its mana cost. So, kind of like Chaos Warp in a way, but also slightly different. Chaos Warp will hit enchantments, and it has a chance of whiffing for your opponent. This never whiffs, and but it does, and it doesn't target non-enchantment, or it doesn't target enchantments. But you can cast it on 2 different things, like sometimes for like 1 mana more. I don't know.
So the idea of Casualty 2 is huge to me because that makes it a sack outlet, that makes it a forked spell. Being able to fork something like Chaos Warp is pretty good.
I've done this.
It doesn't hit enchantments, that's true, but a lot of times when you use Chaos Warp, aren't you? For me, I'm using Chaos Warp on a creature that's about to donk me for 6, 7, 8 damage. So it still will usually get rid of that overall.
Or like an artifact maybe that was like a high value piece or something like that. Like it's very rare that the enchantment is your highest priority target anyway. Agreed.
Right. Yeah. And then, everything else about it, like the only thing that I don't really like about it is that your opponent casts the next thing. Where Chaos Warp, I think, just puts it onto the battlefield. So if it's a sorcery or an instant, it just doesn't do anything.
Yeah, like it's got to be a permanent, right? Like that's Chaos Warp, is it's a permanent. This will get anything you want.
This allows your opponent to cast, so maybe they're going to get maybe they'll get a sorcery or an instant to do something with. But I think ultimately, if you are trading your opponent's, like we just mentioned, Crater Hoof, if you're trading your opponent's Crater Hoof for a I don't know, a draw spell or something, you probably did okay. You probably did pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I agree. I that's always the thing with like Chaos Warp anyway, because people will say like Chaos Warp isn't that good. You're going to give away, like you didn't really get rid of it. You're down a card. They're like usually net the same. And it's like, sure. But the whole point behind red is like, this has to happen right now. It's kind of like blue in a sense, where blue is like, that's a later me problem. And red's like, I don't care what kind of problem that is. It's just not in my face right now. Because the other thing too is, like you said, if you're usually getting like either like I said a high value piece, but like you're also correct that it's usually like the creature that's going to off you right now. And if that's the case, it's not in combat anymore. I don't care if you cast a draw spell or even a board wipe. Like say you board wipe off the top, hilarious. You went to swing and instead you board wiped. Good for you. And it's a May. It's a May.
And you can also use this on yourself and Casualty. So you can use this on 2 of your things that aren't that good and see if you can spin the wheel and get yourself 2 things that are better. So
yeah, like for the low cost of 3 permanents, you could try and get 2 spells that are awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Who knows?
So, I mean, I think that it's neat. I'm not saying it's a good card. I'm saying that it's a neat card, and I think that you should give it a go and see what kind of fun stories it can create for you. I mean, and also, this one's like 35 cents.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk about one real quick, since we still have a little bit of time left, of one that I think is a good card. This card is called Killer Service. So Killer Service is 2 and a green for an enchantment. When Killer Service enters the battlefield, create a number of food tokens equal to the number of opponents you have. And then at the beginning of your end step, you may pay 2 and sacrifice a token, not a food token, but a token. If you do, create a 4/4 Rhino warrior creature token. This card, I play a lot in various decks that people seem to be like confused as to why it's in there until I have 4 or 5 Rhinos on the board. It's like being able to turn a food token into a 4/4 is pretty good. and you're definitely going to get 2 or 3 food tokens out of this. So you're going to definitely get 2 or 3 rhinos long term out of this.
Easily.
But in any sort of tchotchke deck and anything where you're running like multiple artifact tokens, things like that. I was talking this week about building a food deck, so I'm going to be building something like Yom or something like that, and just having something that turns less less desirable tokens into more desirable tokens is always a plus. And being able to turn a random clue or a random food into a 4/4 is going to feel good a lot of times.
I actually, because I want to give this one a go for like my Rith deck, because I think it'd be super funny to take like one of the 1/1 soldiers or whatever have you, the 1/1 elves, like the little critters, because that deck is, I specifically designed it that way where it just like poops out a bunch of tiny dudes and then just swings. And turning one of them a turn. It's not tons, but like having the ability to turn one of them a turn for like 2 mana, just upgrade it. I've paid more for less.
Yep. And I mean, like, and the cool thing is that like you can attack with those 1/1s, and then when they survive to the end of the turn, you make an untapped 4/4.
Yeah.
Like you're gaining an untapped creature out of it, along with it being permanently 3 power and toughness bigger. So
I would see that. I'm
in.
Yeah, I would give that a go. And I mean, like, I don't know. This one's got a little bit of a stretch between its 2 forms, but we'll say on average of $1.
Yeah. I'm seeing, again, available at Card Kingdom, 50 cents.
Yeah, there you go. Go buy it.
Go. Yeah, it's there.
It's just neat.
Let's do it.
Skyboon Evangelist, 4 and a white for a bird advisor, 3/3 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, support 6. So put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 6 other target creatures. And whenever a creature with a counter on it attacks one of your opponents, that creature gains flying until end of turn. This sounds like it'd be super cool for you, and you're probably wondering, okay, but that's really good, but why would I want to pay 5 mana for that? The key here is whenever a creature with a counter attacks one of your opponents, it does not say your creatures. If one of your opponent's creatures has a +1/+1 counter on it, which many times they do, it gives that creature flying when it attacks one of your opponents. This is an effect that we've seen to great effect on Blast Furnace Hellkite. The one that whenever a creature attacks one of your opponents, it gets double strike till end of turn. It's also a giant flying dragon, but possibly with Affinity. Isn't that the one with Affinity?
Yeah, it has Artifact Offering, which is similar to Affinity.
Offering. Yeah, sack an artifact, and that covers part of the cost. Anyway.
Yeah.
But the important part is that, like, when you go to attack, when anyone attacks one of your opponents, they get a buff, whether it be double strike with that thing, flying with this thing if they have a counter. I mean, a 3/3 flyer that puts out 6 +1/+1s. If you're playing a +1 stack, this is an okay rate. But I would be more interested in seeing how many creatures you can get flying at your opponents.
I often play a deck. I play my Kodama the West Tree deck, which is a modified deck that is based on +1/+1 counters. If an opponent put out Skyboon Evangelist, I would not kill them until everyone else was dead. Because one of the things that my deck struggles with the most is if for some reason people have a bunch of little dorks that they can block with, and I haven't gotten one of my trample effects going. Well, now I have flying thanks to this opponent. Thank you so much. Gives me a bonus, and it keeps them alive, which means they can wait until I kill everyone else and then board wipe and then put us back in a position of square one. They're in white, so they can do that. And overall, like, I feel like this is the kind of card that you see that it's not the most powerful thing. It's not going to be broken at any table. It's going to feel good to play, though. You're going to find benefits for doing these kind of things. And obviously, since you're the one playing it, you can build your deck to help you get something out of this more. If you're playing a heavy token deck, you're going to be able to get 6 creatures to get them a little stronger. Or if you're playing a deck that has +1/+1 synergies, here you go. It just gives you extra +1/+1 counters for nothing, for just playing the card. So good.
And a lot of these, I think the reason why I like them so much, and like we've been I don't know how much we've actively discussed it because we don't super talk
Mm-hmm.
about like just we talk about a variety of things and then like touch on stuff lightly all the way around.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
one thing that I find to be very important these days is being the second scariest person at the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, as I was saying, with like protection racket being just not quite enough for anyone to bother with me,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like this where it's like has an effect, has an impact, but it isn't the most impactful. Like, and to put it in perspective, I will talk about. I actually did play a Magic the Gathering card game last night. Go figure. How strange. And I was playing my Nethroi deck, and Matt, you helped me with this deck, and you told me it was okay, so I did so, and I slotted into that deck Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, big scary Magic card. We've talked about it at length, but
Mm-hmm.
I I says, is this deck okay to put this card in? And we kind of agreed yes. And then yesterday, I was playing this Magic the Gathering card game, and I had in my hand Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. And I went, this is going to be too scary. They're going to try and take me out. And I did not play it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best ways to like survive in a game of Commander is to be like the second scariest person at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And these are great ways to do
It's
it.
a Yeah, it's a good way to set yourself up long term because you can always play the scary card later when you feel like they can't stop you, but you got to live to that point, right?
Mhm.
Another quick thing I wanted to talk about was like we picked this handful of cards, and as you see, we've gotten through in an hour. We got through a fair handful.
Which is way more than
There's
usual.
several more cards. We could have done a whole nother episode on just the legendaries that I feel like came out of this set that we could have talked about in tandem. And we decided to stay off of legendaries. And I think that what Adam said about it earlier was kind of on point, which is we're so flooded with legendary choices, with commander choices, that it's hard to look at any particular legendary and necessarily like get super excited about building a deck on it when you have four other decks that you've been excited to build for a while and just haven't gotten around to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say if you are interested in this, let us know. We'll do an episode on those. But even if you're not interested, but you want to do a little legwork yourself, go look up some of these commanders or some of these legendaries that came out of these commander decks because they do create interesting board states and things that we like you won't see at every table. And it's not none of them are bad. They're all actually anywhere from medium to good,
Mm-hmm.
even great, some of them that see very little play at all just because it came out of this and people don't know about it. I know three people who, if I say the words "Angelo the Painter," might know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, like,
and
that Esper Sphinx guy, Tivit or whatever,
mm-hmm,
like,
Tivit, yep.
You had put together a fabulous argument about like why you wanted to build that deck. Like in our pre-conversation, you're like, I wanted to build this, I couldn't do it in the way I wanted, but like, why is it still played so well? We took a look at it. It's because it's actually a good Magic card, and you know who knew about that? Not this guy.
Yeah.
Right, like we're entrenched players, and we got this idea from again our good friend Light, who is also a very entrenched Magic player, and we all know cards without reading them, like, and are able to dictate to you what they say without having them in front of us, and we don't know what's in these sets.
Mm-hmm.
We know content creators that do this for a living, whose whole job is to tell you about Magic cards. And they don't know what's in this stuff. And it's their actual job. Mm-hmm. We do this because we think it's fun and we like talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
How the hell are we supposed to know what's up when there's people who actually like are employed by this? And how are you supposed to know when you're like a casual player or a mostly entrenched player or whatever have you, like whatever level you engage with Magic the Gathering in or at or whatever? How are you supposed to keep track of all this?
Right. Which I thought that this was super fun. I know that we will come back to this well at some point, but if you're listening and you are curious about a particular one and you'd like us to know, put it down in the comments below. Tell us, like, I'd really like to know what cards I'm sleeping on from Zendikar Rising or whatever. And we'll look at those and we'll definitely consider them as far as topics go. And also, while you're down in the comments, you can leave us a comment about something from the set that you think is a sleeper that we didn't talk about, and maybe tell us why you think that card is particularly good to check out outside of our realm.
And there's Matt taking my outro like I stole back the segue. What a jerk. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. This was a really fun topic. I also enjoyed it a lot, and I think that it's more in line with what I think you want to do. And also, asterisk, every one of these is amazing in cube, way better than it is in your commander decks, because they're going to be those like sleeper hits where you're going to want them. Put everything we talked about and more in your commander cubes. That is my addition to this. Matt, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Always.
And gang, we will catch you next time on Unlimited Commander. Have a great time.
Bye.
If you liked what we had to say, consider supporting us on Patreon. Your support goes directly to growing and improving the show.
You can also like, follow, and subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Make sure to comment or leave a review. The cast can also be found on Twitter at Unlimited Commander.
You can find Matt's Twitch, Twitter, and other YouTube projects at knowledgepoolmtg.com.
And Adam can be found on Twitch and Twitter at Adamus_Prime86.
Our theme song is Polaroid by Harris Heller, licensed by Creative Commons.